Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Audio Tools Explained. Today we are doing our last section on compression and we are going to be exploring sidechain compression. Now today's episode we are going to be working in Ableton as opposed to Nuendo, my usual DAW. There's a couple reasons for this. Sidechain compression is just easier to set up in Ableton, and a lot of sidechain compression will commonly be done in electronic music, which is typically written or produced inside of Ableton, as Nuendo is typically more of a scoring or sound effect or working with film DAW. So I figured it'd be easier to explain and show you guys how this works in a DAW that is more suited for this purpose. For those of you who don't know what sidechain compression is, sidechain compression is when you have an audio signal from one track in your project being sent to a compressor that is on another track in your project. So basically what this does is you are compressing sound using audio that is not on that track. What this does is you are effectively making something quieter when something else is playing. I say this is used a lot for EDM or electronic music because what a producer will normally do with sidechain compression is they will use the kick to trigger a sidechain compressor on their bass, or use the low end of a kick to trigger a compressor on the low end of their bass. And I'll explain how to do both of those in Ableton here. What this does is, because when you're mixing, you don't want a lot of multiple low-end signals. In fact, you don't want any multiple low-end signals, especially in EDM, because what this will do is it will very, very quickly muddy up your low end, and it will overall just lower the quality of your track. You want your low end to be clean and precise, and you normally only want one low end instrument playing at a time. You do not want to layer low end. You don't want to have layered subs. You only want to have one signal for your low end at a time. You only ever want to have one sub. If you feel like your sub needs more detail or more character to it, do not layer the low end. If you want it to have more character and detail, create something that'll give it the character and detail and cut out all the low end of it. Cut out everything below like 120. And then blend it in with the appropriate volume, because what this will do is it will give it the more character detail. It will keep your low end nice and clean, nice and detailed. I'm going to do this with an example like I just mentioned. I'm going to use this kick in the session that I've just set up to tell the bass to be quieter when the kick is playing. Right now I've just got this basic session set up with a kick, a bass, and a snare. It sounds really basic 4 on the floor beat with a little bit of bass. Really basic, not even that professional sounding really. I'm gonna just load up the stock compressor on this bass here, and I'm gonna open it up to the sidechain view, which you do just by hitting this little arrow on the bottom. Now, sidechain compression can be done in any DAW, but as I said, I'm just doing it in Ableton here because it's easier to explain, easier to set up. The concepts will be the same on any DAW. I'm going to turn on the sidechain mode. Depending on your DAW, you might not need to do this with a stock compressor. Depending on your compressor, you might not need to turn on a sidechain mode, but it's good to do. So once you have that on, you're going to come down here to this audio input from section. It's really, really important that you have all your tracks named. As you can see, I don't really have my tracks named well. Now my tracks are labeled nice, and you can go in here and I can select my kick track right off the bat. Now, if you have layered kicks, same thing as layered bass, cut out the low end of one of your layers so that you only have one layer doing the pronounced low end. If you have only one layer that's doing a pronounced low end and you want to tell the low end of your bass to get out of the way, put this sidechain compressor on the bass with that low end, because like as I said, you want the low end of the bass to dip out of the kick and you want it to be more powerful. This is all EDM mixing tips. If you're not writing EDM, kind of the same concepts would apply to you. If you have a really low end instrument and you have a really low end percussive instrument, or you have any sort of low end that would be playing at the same time, either find a way to separate it so that the low end isn't really stacking up on each other, or apply some sidechain compression so that one low end will dip out of another one. So once we have this compressor getting audio from our kick, it will compress to the kick and not the bass. if I mute the kick here and I mute the snare and I just listen to the bass with the compressor off, it'll sound just like the bass. However, once I turn the sidechain compression on and I get a decent ratio going here, you'll notice that when the kick audio is being played, you won't hear the kick audio being played, but when it is being played, the bass will get quieter. It's a very slight difference, the way I'm having it set up right now. If I turn the ratio up, you'll hear it a lot more. And you can see my gain reduction is fluctuating with my kick. Now, if I add a shorter kick drum in with a much less sustained out low end, it'll trigger the compressor faster and for a shorter amount of time, and you'll hear this difference a lot more pronounced. You can hear where the notes that are triggered or played directly under our bass are a lot quieter and they're dipping out of the way. Now, here's what this would sound like in context with this shorter kick without the compressor. You can hear our kick really isn't standing out as much as possibly we would like. And when we turn the sidechain compressor on, the kick will stand out more and the bass will still be noticeable. And even if I play it and toggle in between the two of them, you can hear a drastic difference. This is it with it off and on. You can hear the extreme difference in the sound of our kick, and the bass doesn't sound really affected at all. You can still hear it in the background. And this is why sidechain compression is so important, is because it helps clean up your mix. It helps pronounce your low-end instruments extremely. This can be used in any scenario in your imagination. You can go wild with this. I am demonstrating it in the most common use, which is to push a kick forward and push a bass back in the terms of electronic music. You can use this to push any instrument out of any other instrument's way. You can use it to push a snare drum out of the way of a similar percussive instrument in the same range, such as a shaker drum or a dole or a taiko. You can use it to push a shaker out of the way of a hi-hat. You can use it for any sort of means necessary or any sort of idea. And that is why it is such a great and useful mixing tool. Now, another great way to use this is to use it to just affect the low end. And to do this, we actually need to set up something called a effects group. So what we do is we just split this into high and low end by creating another chain and putting some EQ filters on it. So this is going to be our high end. And to do that, we are actually just going to cut out our low end below 120 roughly hertz. And then we're going to put another one here. And we are going to cut out our high end at the exact same frequency that we had in the other one. What this will effectively do is it will still sound the exact same, but now you have control over the high end and the low end. What we have done is we have put our compressor on the low end so that we will only be sidechain compressing the low end of our bass. You can hear that it will sound different if I compare it to just the low end one and not the low end one. I have another copy of it here doing the exact same thing, but to all of it, which I have turned off. And I have this one that is just doing the low end turned on. So if we play it back, this is our low end, on, off, on, off. And now we'll do the same thing with the overall again. So it's off, and then on. So both of them sound different. The one that does overall makes the kick stand out a lot. It's a really clear, very audible kick Whereas the one that just does the low end, you're kind of just pushing the low end of the bass out of the way. It's not necessarily as pronounced. If we put this filter up to something higher, the difference will be a little more pronounced. And really, how much you're pushing the bass back can be determined by both how much you're compressing the bass as well as where your filter is split. If you're compressing the entirety of the bass, or whatever instrument you're compressing, it's going to make the other instrument that you're sidechaining from stand out a lot more. However, if you do a frequency split and only affect the low-end frequencies up to a certain frequency, you can also determine how much it's going to stand out in your mix. Now, sidechaining compression, as you can tell, is a completely different beast than just regular compression, where you are focusing on handling transients or sustaining the body or meshing all your sounds together so that they all sound cohesive together. It's more of a tool used to automatically dip the volume of something. When you're doing sidechain compression, always make sure your makeup gain is off. You do not want to have any sort of makeup gain, because then you're defeating the purpose of doing sidechain compression. Another useful tip for sidechain compression, make sure your ratio is set a little higher. Generally, I like to do my sidechain compression around a 4:1 ratio. You also want your attack to be instant, as low as it'll go. And for this is because you want the sound to duck out as soon as the other sound starts, the sound you're triggering from. I don't want the bass to be dipped 30 milliseconds after the kick plays. I want the bass to dip as soon as the kick plays so that the kick is prominent and audible and standing out in my mix. You also want your release to be set to release the compression as soon as your trigger audio stops. So I want this compression to stop as soon as the kick stops, because I don't want to have any sort of wubbing effect. And what I mean by wubbing effect is it's still dipping the bass after the kick stops playing. You want it to be an inaudible dip in the sense that your ears won't really pick up on it. If I mute all of these kick samples and just play this one, and I have the release set insanely high here, 3 seconds, you'll hear what I mean by sort of wubbing effect. You can see here even the gain reduction is still happening, and we're almost 2 bars away. And if I increase the ratio and make it dip even more, it's even more pronounced. Or if I bring the threshold down more, you can hear it so much. And that's not what you want. You want the instrument that you're dipping out of the way to pop right back up as soon as the other instrument's done playing, so that your compressed instrument can fill the gap that it's intended to fill. So you want to make sure your release is set at a decent length so that the compression is done fast enough that your compressed instrument can come in and fill that gap. Now, this is totally dependent on what you're compressing, the situation that you're in, the instruments you're using. Each bass is different, each kick sample is different. However, generally somewhere between 50 to 150 milliseconds is a good starting place. Even shorter than that, depending on your instrument and how you're compressing it. This is a faster kick and a faster bass line, so generally you would want a faster release. Now, I have it set to 45 milliseconds, and for this particular scenario that's working, our bass and kick aren't that fast. They're not like psytrance fast, and there's a little bit of a space here between the kick and the next bass note, which allows it a little bit of time to uncompress and be ready to go before the next bass note happens. Even a little bit of a faster release would be preferable. Let's go down to 17. Now let's hear that on our compressor that's doing everything. Let's go down to 17 on it. So that's pretty much it on sidechain compression. It is a very, very useful tool. It's a very, very different beast than regular compression as well, as I mentioned. Now, I highly recommend, if you have any questions on sidechain compression or regular compression, leave me a comment. I will respond. I'm usually pretty good with responding to comments. So leave a comment below if you have any questions. If you found this useful, if you found it educational, give me a like, give me a subscribe. It really, really helps. And it would mean a lot to me personally. So I'll see you guys next week. We will probably be doing another audio tools explained on some other tools that we haven't gone over yet. So stay tuned, and I will see you guys in the future. Bye-bye.